Imagine a 6-year-old child just forced to stand for 3 hours a day with food in his mouth.
Right, until he swallows it.
Yeah, until he swallows it. And, this wasn't some historical horror story from the dark ages of institutional care.
No, not at all.
This was an actual, recent treatment protocol ordered by a clinical director, specifically because she felt an eating behavior program was just moving too slowly.
And she implemented this without any parent consent.
Which is wild.
It really is. Without exhausting less intrusive means and with zero peer-reviewed research to back it up. I mean, she even trained her registered behavior technicians to carry out the protocol.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a profound, terrifying failure of professional duty.
It really is. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. If you're joining us, you are likely navigating the complex world of applied behavior analysis, or ABA. Maybe you're prepping for your BCBA exam, or perhaps you're a seasoned practitioner just, catching up on the field. Today, we're unpacking Section E.2 of the BCBA exam content outline.
Which is huge.
It's massive. We're talking about identifying the risks to oneself, others, and the profession when engaging in unethical behavior. Basically, we're looking at the real-world consequences of getting this wrong.
Because the stakes are incredibly high.
Right. Not just for your clients, but for your certification and your livelihood. So you need resources that go beyond, like textbook definitions.
Absolutely.
That's why we highly recommend following Amethyst Therapy Services. You can visit them at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or just reach out directly at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
They are such an essential resource for mastering this material and, really preparing for the exam.
Because mastering this material is truly non-negotiable. As that opening case shows, ethics in behavior analysis isn't a theoretical exercise.
No, it's a literal survival guide.
Exactly.
When we talk about identifying risks, we have to start at the absolute core of the issue, which is the vulnerability of the client.
Let's dig into that opening case, actually, because it's case 2.15 in our source material. The director decided the program was moving too slowly, and she bypassed every ethical safeguard.
Every single one.
But beyond breaking the rules, this violates the fundamental science of ABA, right?
Right.
By unilaterally implementing a punishment protocol without conducting a functional assessment to understand why the child wasn't swallowing.
Right, the function.
Yeah, she just threw the science out the window. It feels equivalent to a medical doctor prescribing aggressive chemotherapy without ever checking to see if the patient actually has cancer.
That's the perfect analogy, because in behavior analysis, a punishment protocol isn't simply, putting a child in timeout or giving a stern look.
Right.
It is a highly specific, highly restrictive intervention designed to decrease a behavior. So implementing it without understanding the function of the behavior, whether the child had a physiological swallowing issue or a sensory aversion.
Or even just a skill deficit.
Exactly. It means the intervention is purely arbitrary. And when interventions become arbitrary and restrictive, they cease to be scientific.
Yeah.
They literally become abusive. This directly violates Code 2.01, providing effective treatment and the overarching mandate to basically do no harm.
It makes me think of structural rot in a house.
Oh, I like that.
The immediate damage is inflicted directly on that 6-year-old client.
Yeah.
That is the most visible, heartbreaking harm. But then the rot spreads.
It always does.
Right, spreads to the family's trust. They will probably never trust a therapeutic professional again. Then it infects the RBTs, the technicians who are being explicitly trained by a superior to normalize and execute these abusive practices.
Which is terrifying for the future of the field.
Yes. And eventually the entire foundation of the clinic, and by extension the field of ABA, just collapses under public scrutiny.
Well, and the historical context here is crucial to understanding why that structural rot is so dangerous to the profession.
Right.
The sources remind us that the field of behavior modification has a relatively short but highly complicated history.
To put it mildly.
Right. If you look back to the early days, researchers were applying learning theory to institutionalized populations who weren't receiving any other forms of effective treatment.
But they were operating completely in the dark, ethically speaking. I mean, there was no formalized ethics code. No institutional review boards, and very little oversight.
Yeah, and to be completely objective about the history, their work was often started for that era of institutional care.
Sure, yeah. different times.
Right. And sometimes it was even done with the full knowledge of guardians.
Yeah.
But the lack of ethical boundaries, the failure to prioritize the autonomy and dignity of the individual, it created a lasting, deeply negative public perception.
Oh, absolutely.
So unethical behavior today doesn't just harm the immediate client, it resurrects those old ghosts. It breathes life back into those historical stigmas and just validates every critic's worst fear about behavior modification.
Which means the practitioner who, cuts an ethical corner is severely damaging the credibility of ABA as a legitimate, compassionate science.
Exactly.
So if the first risk is profound harm to the client and the profession, the second wave of risk inevitably crashes back down onto the professional.
The blowback.
The blowback.
Yeah.
And the leap from clinical rot to structural organizational rot seems to happen when these compromises become systemic. Let's look at the early Autism Project fraud case that the sources talk about.
Oh, man. That case is a masterclass in how systemic organizational rot destroys careers.
It really is.
From about 2009 to 2016, this agency cultivated a culture of just massive financial fraud. I mean, employees were forging parent signatures to bill Medicaid and TRICARE for therapies that never actually happened.
How?
They were padding timesheets, altering documents, and just billing for phantom services.
But how does something like that even happen on such a massive scale? Like, people don't usually wake up one morning and decide to run a multi-million-dollar Medicaid fraud ring.
Yeah.
It has to be a product of the behavioral contingencies within the workplace itself. Like, I imagine a scenario where a supervisor subtly pressures an employee to round up their billable hours to meet some corporate quota.
Yep.
The employee does it, the company gets paid, the employee gets a bonus or just avoids getting yelled at. The unethical behavior is reinforced.
You are identifying the exact mechanism of behavioral drift.
Okay.
The reinforcement schedules and corporate billing can create immense pressure that shapes unethical behavior over time. It starts with a seemingly minor infraction.
Like 5 minutes here or there.
Exactly. Billing for a 15-minute gap while a parent was late. And when that behavior is reinforced by the system, either through financial reward or the removal of administrative pressure, the magnitude of the behavior just increases.
Wow.
Before long, you have widespread systemic forgery. This is a catastrophic violation of Code 2.06, accuracy in service billing and reporting, and Code 1.01, being truthful.
And the consequences are absolute. We're talking about criminal charges, massive government fines.
The permanent loss of board certification.
Right, and entirely ruined livelihoods, which actually brings us to a really critical part of the source material that is a massive trap for anyone taking the BCBA exam.
Oh, the self-reporting rules.
Yes, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board's strict self-reporting rules. The BACB requires practitioners to self-report specific events within 30 days.
And the exam traps here are notorious because they often catch people off guard regarding their personal lives.
Yeah.
You're required to self-report public health and safety tickets over $750.
Which is crazy.
You must self-report a DUI. You have to self-report being fired for an ethics violation, or if you become the subject of any government investigation.
Wow.
You even have to report if you develop a physical or mental health condition or a substance use disorder that impairs your ability to safely practice.
Okay, I have to pause and push back on this a little bit because the line between personal and professional seems completely blurred here.
Sure.
If I get a hefty traffic ticket for speeding, or if I struggle with a personal mental health crisis, or God forbid I make a terrible decision and get a DUI on a weekend while completely off the clock.
Right.
How is my personal life the business of a professional licensing board?
Yeah.
It feels like an incredible overreach into a practitioner's private life.
It is a very common reaction to feel that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it requires us to look closely at the underlying logic of Codes 1.02, conforming with legal requirements, and 1.03, accountability. The BACB is not trying to police your personal morality.
Okay.
They are mitigating risk for a highly vulnerable population. Behavior analysts work with children, individuals with severe developmental disabilities, and people who often just cannot advocate for themselves.
Right, so the vulnerability of the client dictates the standard of accountability.
Precisely. A personal lapse, like a DUI, isn't just a weekend mistake. It speaks directly to judgment, impulse control, and legal compliance.
That makes sense.
Right. An untreated substance use disorder fundamentally impairs clinical decision-making, reaction times, and the ability to maintain client safety. Because the public places immense trust in your certification, you are accountable to the public at all times.
Wow.
The board is building a necessary failsafe. They need to know if your judgment is compromised so they can ensure that client safety is never put in jeopardy.
The leap from like a personal DUI or a massive Medicaid fraud ring seems huge, but the bridge between them is built in the daily grind of the workplace, where these small ethical compromises go unchecked.
Exactly.
Most ethical violations in ABA don't stem from blatant malice. They stem from burnout, poorly designed organizational systems, and the murky trenches of supervision.
Workplace dynamics are exactly where the vast majority of ethical slips occur. The source material actually provides two contrasting cases about employment and supervision that perfectly illustrate these gray areas.
Okay, let's hear them.
Let's look at case 1.01. A supervisee was pulled into a meeting by two BCBAs and asked for her honest opinion about company morale.
Always a trap.
Right. Well, she specifically asked if she would be retaliated against for telling the truth, and they explicitly promised she wouldn't be.
So she gave him honest feedback. She reported that the therapists were unhappy with their heavy workloads and the poor quality of supervision. And because she trusted that no retaliation policy, I'm guessing she found herself completely out of a job.
Yep. 2 days later, she was fired.
Oh my God.
The supervising BCBS terminated her specifically because of that conversation.
That is a punishing environment that will permanently suppress any honest reporting in that clinic. It's a blatant violation of Code 1.01, being truthful, and it just creates a hostile retaliatory culture.
Completely.
But let's contrast that with case 4.12b, where the script is kind of flipped. A BCBA is supervising a candidate who is exhibiting completely toxic behavior.
Oh, this case. Yeah.
The candidate is berating staff members and refusing to follow behavior plans for clients who are escalating, which puts everyone in the clinic in actual physical danger.
Right.
But the supervision contract stipulates a standard 30-day notice to terminate the relationship.
So the supervisor is faced with a dilemma. Do they honor the 30-day professional courtesy outlined in the contract, or do they terminate the candidate immediately?
Well, given what we just discussed about prioritizing the vulnerable client, I have to deduce that client safety absolutely supersedes a 30-day professional courtesy.
You'd hope so.
You cannot leave a toxic variable in the clinical environment for a month while clients are put at risk.
You nailed it. The answer is a resounding yes. You can and must terminate immediately. If a supervisee is actively jeopardizing the well-being of clients or team members, your ethical obligation is to act swiftly to remove the threat. The contract does not override the safety of the client.
The Bailey and Birch text introduces a concept that I find incredibly useful for conceptualizing these daily dilemmas. They note that ethical challenges aren't always a giant world-ending asteroid heading for your career.
Right. Usually it's not that dramatic.
Much more often, they are a meteor shower of tiny, annoying pings. It's the constant low-level friction of the job.
The meteor shower analogy is brilliant because it captures the cumulative effect of those small compromises.
Yeah.
It's a supervisor casually asking you to walk their dog and bill it as client observation time.
Which happens.
It does. It's a parent offering you a really nice, seemingly innocent gift at the holidays because they appreciate your work. It's a colleague venting about a difficult client on a private Facebook group thinking it's harmless. Ping, ping, ping.
And if your deflector shields aren't up, those tiny pings will eventually breach the hull and sink the ship. So what is the actual protocol for navigating these gray areas? When a practitioner spots one of these issues, what is the sequence of actions they're required to take?
The code synthesizes a very clear escalation protocol. If you spot an issue, your first step, assuming there is no immediate risk of physical harm and it is safe to do so, is to attempt an informal resolution. You address the concern directly and privately with the person involved. You might say, hey, I noticed you billed for an hour when we were just getting coffee discussing cases.
Right.
We really need to correct that timesheet to reflect accurate billing.
So you give them the opportunity to correct the behavioral drift before it becomes a systemic issue.
Yes, exactly. But if that informal resolution fails, or if the violation is severe from the start, like the clinical director abusing the 6-year-old child.
Right. There's no informal chat there.
No, informal resolution is entirely off the table in that scenario. You must escalate immediately. You're required to file a notice of alleged violation with the BACB. And, depending on the severity, you may need to report it to state licensing boards, insurance funders, or child protective services.
Wow.
In our field, silence is never an option. Ignoring an ethical violation is, in itself, a severe ethical violation.
Knowing the reporting rules, understanding the 30-day self-reporting trap, and knowing how to file a notice of alleged violation, all of that is vital for the exam. But in practice, it is entirely reactive.
Very true.
You're just cleaning up the debris after the meteor shower has already damaged the station. We need to shift gears and talk about how a practitioner can build that deflector shield to stop the meteor shower before it even starts.
This is the transition from reactive compliance to proactive ethics.
Yes.
One of the most powerful preventative tools a behavior analyst has in their arsenal is a document called the Declaration of Professional Practices and Procedures.
Let's break down the mechanics of this document. The sources describe it as something you provide to clients at the very beginning of services, usually right at intake before any actual therapy or assessment begins.
Yep.
It explicitly outlines the boundaries of the professional relationship. It states in plain language, we cannot accept gifts. We cannot attend personal social events like your child's birthday party or graduation.
Which is tough for some families to hear.
It really is. It says, here are the absolute limits of our confidentiality, and here is my legal duty as a mandated reporter if I suspect any abuse or neglect.
It also clearly instructs the client on exactly what steps to take if they are unhappy with your services, including providing the direct contact information for the BACB. You are putting all the potential points of friction on the table immediately.
But wait, if I'm handing a family a strict, legal-sounding declaration on day one, doesn't that immediately kill the warm, therapeutic rapport I'm supposed to be building?
It can feel that way.
I mean, these are families who are often overwhelmed and looking for a supportive partner. And handing them a list of thou shalt nots feels incredibly cold and bureaucratic.
It is a totally valid concern, but it requires a complete reframing of how we view professional boundaries. Establishing those boundaries up front is not cold. It is actually an act of deep clinical compassion.
Walk me through the psychology of that. How does a strict rulebook equal compassion?
Because ambiguity breeds anxiety, and eventually it breeds conflict.
Okay.
Imagine a family who doesn't know the rules. They feel immense gratitude for the progress their child is making, so they spend their hard-earned money on a beautiful holiday gift for you. If you haven't set the boundary, you now have to awkwardly hand that gift back, citing a rule they've never heard of. The family feels rejected, embarrassed, and confused. The rapport is damaged.
Oh, I see.
By setting the rules on day one, you prevent those misunderstandings entirely. You build a foundation of absolute clarity. The family knows exactly what to expect from you and what you expect from them.
That makes perfect sense. The declaration acts as the deflector shield. It protects the practitioner's career from those daily ethical pings while fiercely protecting the client's rights.
Exactly.
It creates a safe, defined container where that warm therapeutic relationship can actually flourish without the risk of blurred lines.
And building that safe container isn't solely the responsibility of the individual practitioner either. The sources also highlight the role of organizational systems.
Right, like the BHCOE.
Yes. The Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, or BHCOE, standards heavily emphasize that agencies and clinics must step up to create ethical environments.
Because if you leave a practitioner alone in a punishing environment like the supervisee in case 1.01,
The one who got fired for telling the truth.
exactly, the system will eventually break them. The BHCOE recommends that organizations create an internal ethics committee or designate a specific ethics officer within the agency.
An ethics officer provides a structured, safe, and confidential avenue for employees to report those tiny pings or major concerns without any fear of retaliation.
That's huge.
It shifts the organizational culture. Instead of ethics being a punitive threat that only comes up during an audit or a termination, ethics becomes an ongoing, supportive dialogue. It reinforces the practitioner in making the right choices day in and day out.
Bringing all of this together, we've thoroughly unpacked the triad of risk that defines Section E.2. First and foremost, the risk of profound harm to the vulnerable client, the individuals who rely on our science for independence and dignity, not arbitrary punishment.
Right.
Second, we explored the legal and professional ruin for the practitioner, the lost certifications, the fines, and the destroyed careers that result from failing to self-report or falling into the trap of systemic fraud.
And third, the massive, overarching risk to the profession itself, the erosion of ABA's credibility. Every time an unethical act occurs, it degrades the public's trust and threatens the viability of the science for everyone.
It all comes back to that structural rot. The damage hits the client, the collapse ruins the practitioner, and the resulting scrutiny damages the entire field. Understanding these risks isn't just about memorizing a checklist to pass the BCBA exam.
No, not at all.
It is about understanding the profound responsibility you hold when you step into this profession. And remember, Navigating these complex waters requires constant vigilance and the right tools. Head over to Amethyst Therapy Services at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or email them at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
They really do provide the essential, high-quality resources you need to not only conquer the exam, but to build a resilient ethical career.
Because the environment will constantly test your boundaries. Your ethical deflector shields have to be powered up every single day.
They really do.
So here's a final thought to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive. We've spent all this time talking about the human element of ethical drift, burnout, pressure, interpersonal dynamics. But as ABA moves increasingly into the digital space, relying on AI for data tracking, automated behavior analysis, and remote telehealth monitoring, how will these ethical boundaries hold up when the practitioner capturing the data or suggesting the intervention is an algorithm?
Wow. That's a great question.
If ethics truly is the science, who is held accountable to the BACB when the technology makes an unethical choice? Keep that in mind as you look toward the future of the field. The tools may evolve, but the responsibility to protect the vulnerable remains entirely yours.